So here's Incognito, which was originally a standalone application that allowed you to impersonate user tokens when successfully compromising a system. This was integrated into Metasploit and ultimately into Meterpreter. Tokens are a temporary key that allows you to access the system and network without having to provide credentials each time you access a file. Incognito exploits tokens by replaying that temporary key when asked to authenticate. And there are two types of tokens: delegate and impersonate. Delegate tokens are created for interactive logons, such as logging into the machine or connecting to it via remote desktop. Impersonate tokens are for non-interactive sessions, such as attaching a network drive or a domain logon script. One great thing about tokens is they persist until a reboot. When a user logs off, their delegate token is reported as an impersonate token, but will still hold all the rights of a delegate token. Now, once you have a Meterpreter session, you can impersonate valid tokens on the system and become that specific user without ever having to worry about credentials, or for that matter, even hashes. During a penetration test, this is especially useful due to the fact that tokens have the possibility of allowing local and/or domain privilege escalation, enabling you alternate avenues with potentially elevated privileges to multiple systems. So here we are in a Meterpreter session in Kali. Session is on Windows XP Victim. Incognito module is not loaded by default, so type load incognito to load it. Help incognito to list the variety of options we have for incognito and brief descriptions of each option. And what we will need to do first is identify if there are any valid tokens on the system. So we'll use the list tokens command to list the tokens. Well, let's use it with U parameter. Let's impersonate the administrator using impersonate token. Now don't forget to put a double backslash. And after successfully impersonating a token, we check our current user ID by executing the getUID command. Now open a shell in the victim and look at who we are with the whoami command. Well, now we have another method to see who we are through the environmental variables. Echo, user domain, username. We are administrator user on the CL XP system now. Control-C to terminate the shell command. Now I'll use the rev2self command to be the system user again. Type getUID to check it. Okay, see, we are the system user again. So now I'll open the shell again and look who I am once more. Well, the system user looks just like this. Mimikatz is absolutely a great post-exploitation tool. After the initial exploitation phase, attackers may want to get a firmer foothold on the computer or network. Doing so often requires a set of complementary tools. Mimikatz is an attempt to bundle together some of the most useful tasks that attackers will want to perform. Fortunately, Metasploit has decided to include Mimikatz as a Meterpreter script to allow for easy access to its full set of features without needing to upload any files to the disk of the compromised host. So, after obtaining a Meterpreter shell, we need to ensure that our session is running with system-level privileges for Mimikatz to function properly. So use getUID to look at the user. And if it's not system user, we can use getSystem to try to gain system privileges. Now we can load Mimikatz module into the memory. Help Mimikatz to see the Mimikatz commands. Now, Metasploit provides us with some built-in commands that showcase Mimikatz's most commonly used features, dumping hashes and clear text credentials straight from memory. However, the Mimikatz command option gives us full access to all of the features in Mimikatz. Though slightly unorthodox, We can get a complete list of the available modules by trying to load a non-existent feature. So type Mimikatz commands F to specify the feature. Now write something meaningless. For example, just XYZ. Put : at the end and hit enter. Here are the list of the modules we can use in Mimikatz. We can also use Mimikatz commands to extract hashes and clear text credentials from the compromised machine. Type Mimikatz command F samdump and hit enter to see the commands of the samdump module. Now let's use the hashes command and collect all the hashes. To extract the clear text credentials, we can use the search passwords command of the sekurl sa module. This command searches directly in LSAS memory segments for passwords. So type Mimikatz command F sekurl sa, search password, and hit enter. Now here we have a clear text password. Okay, so let's take a little break here and play some Minesweeper. Come on, we're not children. We'll play in expert mode, of course. Well, okay, I'll need some help. So back to Kali. We're in the interpreter session and Mimikatz is loaded. To list the modules of the commands again, type Mimikatz commands F QWE : and hit enter. Now, there's a strange module here, WinMine. Let's look at its commands. So what happens when we use the info command here? Well, I think these stars show the places of the mines. So now we can know where to click. Okay, so restart the Minesweeper again, and I'll use this cheat command for this time around. Now turn back to Minesweeper and, well, click anywhere. And you are the new record holder. Haha, well done. The Escalate group includes the modules that are used to escalate privilege and bypass the restrictions. The Gather group has the biggest number of modules. These modules are used to gather information from the compromised system. And Manage modules change the configuration of the victim system. So let's see the modules first, and then we'll run a few of them as examples. Okay, so now I have an MSF console in Kali now. Post modules are grouped by the operating systems. So let's search for the post modules for Windows first. Now there are a lot of post modules for Windows systems, and the module groups are WLAN, Recon, Manage, Gather, Escalate, and Capture. Now search for the Linux post modules. The Linux-specific post modules are not as many as Windows-specific post modules, but still, it's not bad at all. Gives you something to do anyway. The next search is for the post modules of OS X. And here are the OS X-specific post modules in groups, Capture, Gather, and Manage. So now we'll search for post multi. These modules can be run for more than one operating system. You can find the privileged users such as system admins and database admins. In fact, this module looks at the compromised system's registry and lists the keys and values from the path of HKey users, software, Microsoft, terminal server client. users group. It can also forward the target's port 3389 TCP. The module makes the value of the fdeny TS connections, registry key 1. Plus, if it's closed, the module opens the port which is going to be used by RDP. So in this demo, we have a Windows 8 as the victim with the IP address 223, and here's the attacker Kali. Now let's start MSF console and open an interpreter session first. We've done it several times, and the subject of this demo is not exploiting, so I'll just open the session as fast as I can. Okay, I have an interpreter session on Windows 8 now. First, I want to know whether the remote desktop connection is allowed on the victim or not. I can learn it by looking at the value of the fdeny TS connections, registry key. Thankfully, I have a reg command in Meterpreter. So let's create the appropriate reg command and look at the key. Reg is the command itself. Query val parameter is our intention. We just want to query the value. Now is the key path with K parameter. H key, local machine, system, current control set, control, terminal server. And now the value with the V parameter, fdeny TS connections. And here is the result set. The data of the value is 1, which means the remote desktop connection is not allowed on the victim machine at this time. So let's go to the Windows 8 system to check the configuration of the remote desktop. I want to verify our finding. So in the Start menu, I'll search for the remote word, select Settings. From the results, I select Allow Remote Access to Your Computer. Now we are under the Remote tab of System Properties. As you can see in the remote desktop frame, remote connections to this computer is not allowed, so our finding is correct. But now, let's enable remote desktop connection on the victim. We can run the post module directly under the Meterpreter session using the run command. Type run post windows manage enable RDP and hit enter. And it's finished. To learn if it succeeded, I'd like to query the fdeny TS connections again. Now remember, you can call the previous commands by using the arrow keys. And yes, the data of the value is 0 now. And that means remote desktop is no longer denied. So once again, I will want to double check it with our victim. And again, I search for remote in the Start menu, select Settings, and select Allow Remote Access to Your Computer. And here it is. As you see, the remote connection is allowed now. We succeeded to enable RDP. Well done. But I am not comfortable unless I see the result with my own eyes. I just want to make a remote connection to the victim. So now I'm on my host system, which is a Mac. Now to be able to make a remote connection, I'll go to the App Store to download Microsoft Remote Desktop. I found it, and it looks like it's installing. When the installation is finished, I'll open the app. Now I click New and create a new remote connection. The IP address of the Windows 8 machine is 223. I'll assume that we already know a valid username password pair. And I'll leave the other setting with the default values. Now I'll double-click the connection setup. Okay, I verify the certificate and continue. And that's done. We have a remote desktop connection to the Windows 8 machine. We enabled the remote connection and connected. The module is working like a charm. Now I want to show you something more. Let's go back to the victim system, the Windows 8 VM. Now, have a look at this. When we connect remotely, The current user is logged out because parallel sessions are restricted by default. So, if you don't want to tip off the user of the victim machine, you'd better carry out the remote desktop connection when he or she is away. So, to understand if the user of the computer is away or not, that's when we can use the idle time interpreter command before the remote connection. If the system is idle for a long time, then it's probably safe to assume that the user is away. Well, in fact, there is a way to have parallel sessions on Windows systems. So let's have a look. The current user is not logged out when you connect remotely to the system. I'll just show you the method now, and you can try for yourself later. So what I do is I'll open the web browser and Google for Enable Parallel Sessions in Windows 8 and click the first link. How to enable concurrent sessions is explained here. Now, briefly, you should change the terms rv.dll with an appropriate one. And add the F single session per user value and set it to 0. I have to warn you here, though. Do not download and use any file unless you trust the website 100%. So, if I were you, I wouldn't download the modified DLL file from this site because I just don't know the users. Password hashes are one of the most important findings of the penetration tests. We have seen how to use these hashes without cracking. Remember the Pass the Hash lectures? All other mechanisms except NTLM or LM authentication, we need to crack the passwords to be able to use them. Password cracking is the process of recovering passwords from data that have been stored in or transmitted by a computer system. A common approach is try to guess repeatedly for the password and check them against an available cryptographic hash of the password. But we can talk about 3 basic types of password cracking here. There's, of course, the one that everybody knows, brute force attacks. They work by calculating every possible combination that could make up a password and testing it to see if it's the right one. As a password's length increases, the amount of time to find the correct password increases exponentially. As you see, the possibility to find a password using a brute force attack is theoretically 100%. But cracking the password can take many years, depending on the password complexity. To make the possible value set smaller, it's probably better to use this method if we know something which will reduce the number of tries, such as the length of the password. Now, since users tend to use known words, in dictionary attack, we can use previously prepared dictionaries to find the passwords. It's the smarter method, as opposed to the brute force attacks, and reduce the number of tries dramatically. But in this case, finding the password is not guaranteed. You can find the password only if it's not complicated enough. And of course, it's a good approach to prepare sector-specific or company-specific dictionaries to increase the chances. A rainbow table is a listing of all possible plaintext permutations of encrypted passwords specific to a given hash algorithm. The password cracker compares the rainbow table's precompiled list of potential hashes to hashed passwords in the database. The rainbow table associates plaintext possibilities with each of those hashes, which the attacker can then exploit to access the network as an authenticated user. Rainbow tables make password cracking much faster than the earlier methods, such as brute force cracking and dictionary attacks. Depending on the particular software, rainbow tables can be used to crack 14-character alphanumeric passwords in about 160 seconds. However, the approach uses a lot of RAM due to the large amount of data in such a table. Now, this is a typical Windows local hash. The columns are separated by colons. The first column is the username. Second field is the user ID. It can be thought of as a user group. 500 is for the administrators, 502 ID is for the Kerberos accounts, etc. The third field is the LM hash, and the fourth is the NTLM hash. As you saw on the previous slide, two different hashing methods exist in a local Windows password hash table: LM hashes and NTLM hashes. The LM hash is a very weak one-way function used for storing passwords, originally invented for the LAN Manager operating system. But the LM hash was included in Windows NT for backward compatibility. And it's still included for backward compatibility. However, it is disabled by default since Windows Vista and Windows Server 2008. So let's see the properties of these methods comparatively. Both types of hashes generate a 128-bit stored value. The LM hash has a limited character set of only 142 characters, while the NT hash supports almost the entire Unicode character set of 65,536 characters. While LM allows ciphers up to 14 characters in length, NTLM allows ciphers up to 256 characters in length. Well, you can specify a password consisting of more than 14 characters, but the LM algorithm takes only the first 14 characters of the password into account. And moreover, while NTLM hash calculates the hash based on the entire password the user entered, the LM hash splits the password into two 7-character chunks. Padding is necessary. That means you will crack two 7-character passwords instead of one 14-character password. It makes it dramatically easier to crack LM hashes. Now, furthermore, LM hashes are case insensitive. The password you specified is converted to all uppercases, and then the hash is calculated. Let's give an example for the LM algorithm. Suppose that you specified a password as my secret password with some uppercase and lowercase characters, and the LM hashes are active in that system. The system first converts all characters to uppercase. Then it splits the password into two 7-character chunks, ignores the 15th, and the following characters. So here we have MYSECRE and TPASSWO strings, and the RD part is ignored. And last, the hash values of these parts are calculated. You can crack a 7-character length password in seconds. That means you can crack any LM hash in minutes. As a result, never, ever enable LM hash algorithm in Windows systems. In Linux systems, the etc shadow file stores actual passwords in encrypted format, more like the hash of the password, for a user's account with additional properties related to the user password. Basically, it stores secure user account information. All fields are separated by a colon symbol, and it contains one entry per line for each user listed in the etc password file. Generally, shadow file entry looks as seen in the slide. So let's see the fields of a typical Linux hash values, most probably gathered from the shadow file. Just like in the Windows local hashes, fields are separated by colons in the Linux hashes. The first field is username, your login name. The second field is your encrypted password. Usually the password format is set to $ID, $ALT, $hash. The ID is the algorithm used on GNU Linux as follows. $1 is MD5. $2A is Blowfish. $2Y is Blowfish. $5S is SHA 256. $6 is SHA 512. Now, the third field is the date that the password was last modified. The fourth field is the minimum number of days required between password changes. That is, the number of days left before the user is allowed to change his or her password. The fifth field is the maximum number of days the password is valid. After that, the user is forced to change his or her password. The sixth field is the number of days before the password is to expire. That user is warned that his or her password must be changed. Now, there are two more fields in the line which are blank in this example. The seventh field is called inactive, which is the number of days after password expires that the account is disabled. And the last field is called expire, which indicates the days since 1 January 1970 that the account is disabled. That is, an absolute date specifying when the login may no longer be used. Feasible. And many login forms have a lockout feature that locks you out after a certain number of failed login attempts. For example, if I fail to log on to my online banking after multiple tries, my account will be locked for 20 minutes. Now, in addition, online password cracking attacks are very noisy. And when you're throwing random wrong passwords at a system, its log file will grow tremendously. It looks very suspicious when there are hundreds of wrong password attempts logged into the same IP address. So to get around these factors, you might try to cover up your IP address via a proxy, use a different proxy for every 5 to 10 guesses, or even attempt a few guesses every 30 minutes so it looks less suspicious. Many of the password cracking programs out there have these features available. Now, offline password cracking attacks are only possible when you have access to the password hashes. The attack is done on your own system or on systems that you have local access to. Unlike an online attack, there are no locks or anything else to stop you on an offline attack because you are doing it on your own machines. The only thing that could hold you back is the limits of your computer hardware, because an offline attack takes advantage of its machine's processing power, and its speed is dependent on the speed of the actual machine. So the better the processor, and nowadays even graphics cards, the more password guessing attempts you can get per second. There are a lot of password cracking tools, and some of them are listed on the slide, and now we'll see some of them in detail. Makes a tool exit when it finds a valid username-password pair. Server is another required parameter of the tool, which stands for the target server. And finally, we have to specify the service that we want to attack. Some supported services are HTTP post form, HTTPS post form, HTTP get form, HTTPS get form, HTTP proxy, MS SQL, MySQL, Oracle Listener, SSH, Cisco, etc. Every protocol has its own unique options to set. We'll see the options for HTTP post form in the following demonstration. So now I'll go to Kali and run a web browser. Do you remember OWASP Broken Web Applications, abbreviated BWA server? Well, it's on my network with the IP number of 139. Write in the IP address in the address bar of the browser and hit enter. Now, here's the home page of the OWASP BWA. I'll scroll down a bit and click Damn Vulnerable Web Application link. Now, we arrived at a login page that asks for the username and the password. Now, we don't know any credential, and we'll try to find a valid username-password pair by online password cracking attack. So open a terminal screen. Hydra is embedded in Kali, so you can start to use it simply by typing its name. If you type Hydra with no parameter, the help page appears. Here is the list of options and supported services. So let's start to build our attack. L is the first parameter. To keep the attack simple and fast, I suppose that we'll know a valid user, which is going to probably be admin, so I'll use the lowercase l parameter. Now we specify the password dictionary with uppercase P. Well, there are some dictionaries in Kali. Let me find them, and I'll use one. So I open a new terminal screen and search for the dictionaries using the find Linux command. So I'm looking for the files that start with pass and have .lst extension. I found a few, so let's look at the contents of one of them using the less Linux command. You can search a phrase with / indicator within the less command. So I look for admin if the word exists in the dictionary. Well, because I know the password of the admin user is admin, and I want to show you a successful attack, okay, now this is the target server, OWASP BWA139. I have to specify the service we attack. So to learn the service, let's go to the browser again. But before trying to log in, I run Burp Suite. Now, I think I should tell you a little bit about Burp Suite. Burp Suite is used in web application penetration tests, and I've explained and used it extensively in hacking web applications and penetration testing. That's the course that fully lays it out in detail. But I'll just give you a little introduction to it now if you haven't done that course. Burp Suite is a web application penetration testing framework. It has become an industry standard suite of tools used by information security professionals to identify vulnerabilities and verify attack vectors for web-based applications. I suppose in its simplest form, Burp Suite can be classified as a personal proxy or interception proxy. A penetration tester configures their internet browser to route traffic through the proxy, which then acts as a sort of man in the middle by capturing and analyzing each request and response to and from the target web app. Individual HTTP requests can be paused, manipulated, and replayed back to the web server for targeted analysis of parameter-specific injection points. The injection points can be then specified for manual as well as automated fuzzing attacks to discover potentially unintended application behaviors, crashes, and error messages. You got all that? So now we can continue to the online cracking session with Hydra. Burp Suite is started. We have to route traffic through Burp Suite to be able to listen to the requests and responses and analyze them. So to do this, we should change the proxy settings of the browser to listen to the port 8080 of the local host. You can change the proxy of the browser from the Preferences menu. I just use Foxy Proxy. It's a plugin to change the proxy of the browser easily. This little fox icon is Foxy Proxy. I'll click on it. And here there's proxy settings for the port 8080 of the local host. Now, you can use the proxy from your browser's network setting, as seen in the picture here. So I'll choose the proxy localhost 8080, and now my browser's traffic is routed through the Burp Suite. So now I'll make a login attempt. So Burp intercepted the login request. It's a post, so we find the service to attack. Back to the Hydra query, the next parameter is HTTP post form. Now is the most critical part of building a Hydra attack, setting the options of the service. There are three parts of the options of the service HTTP post form separated by the colon character. The first part is the address of the authentication form. The second part is the form parameters, and here they are. I'll copy them and paste them as the second part of the service options. Now, this is an important point again. The place that the passwords will be set for online cracking attacks are labeled as pass between two caret signs. Same as a password field. The place of the username is signed as user between two caret characters as well. The third part of the service option is a unique part from the response message of a failed login attempt. So I go to the browser, copy the login failed message, and paste that as a third part of the option. I think the service options are ready. So at last, I put a F parameter to make the tool exit when it finds a valid credential. So we're ready to run the command now. Just hit enter and online password cracking attack starts. Now we'll wait as much as it takes. It reports every minute. And this is the first minute's report. 933 tries per minute. That's pretty good. And it says it has 2,626 tries to do. Now here it found a valid username password pair just after the second minute's report. The username was already fixed, admin, and it found that the password is admin for the user. And since we used the F parameter, it stopped working as soon as it found a valid credential. Now we can go to the app and enter admin for the username and again admin for the password to log in. Force and cryptanalysis attacks, recording VoIP conversations, decoding scrambled passwords, recovering wireless network keys, revealing password boxes, uncovering cached passwords, and analyzing routing protocols. The program does not exploit any software vulnerabilities or bugs that could not be fixed with little effort. It covers some security aspects and weaknesses present in protocol standards, authentication methods, and caching mechanisms. But its main purpose is the simplified recovery of passwords and credentials from various sources. However, it also ships some non-standard utilities for Microsoft Windows users. Let's download it and install it on a Windows platform. I'm going to use my Windows 8 VM for this purpose. So open an internet browser and search for Kane-able download. Now the first link is oxid.it, which is the developer company of the tool, so click on it. The first link is for version 2 of the tool, which is not supported anymore, and the second link is for version 4.9.56. So let's click on the second link and download the setup file. When the download finishes, click on it to start the installation. The installation wizard starts. It's a next finish process. You can install the tool with the default configurations just by clicking the next buttons until you see the finish button. Oops, Windows Defender thinks that Kane-enable is potentially harmful. Who would have guessed? So this is just because that it's a password cracking tool. So what I'll do is I'll go to Windows Defender by clicking on the message, click Show Details, and from the combo box choose Allow and click Apply Actions. So now we can keep going. Now it asks to install WinPCAP to analyze network files. Now, we don't need it for now, so it doesn't matter whether you install it or not. Now we have a shortcut for Kane on the desktop. We can simply double-click it to start the tool. Now that we're ready, the first step is to import the hash file to crack. So we are the Cracker tab now. As you see, Kane has a lot of crackers. We'll use the first one, LM and NTLM hash cracker. Select LM and NTLM hashes on the tree at the left-hand side of the tool. Then click the plus icon in the toolbar menu. The Add NT Hashes From window appears, and select Import Hashes from a text file. Well, it looks like someone needs a hash. Now we're ready to run the exploit. Interpreter session is open. Use hash dump command to get the hashes, and here they are. So let's copy them all and paste them into a text file, which will be our hash file. I'll use the nano editor for this purpose. I'll open a new text file named hashxp.txt. Right-click and paste. Control-X to exit, Y to save changes, and hit Enter to save the file that we named at the beginning. Now look at the upper left corner. Now we have a hash file on the desktop. So now I want to get the hash file of my Windows 8 VM as well. I send the current interpreter session to the background. I'll use psexec once more for Windows 8 VM this time. Our host is 223. Username is Amiden. Suppose that we collect this data in the exploitation phase and run the exploit. Now I have an interpreter session on Windows 8 VM. So run hash dump to collect the hashes. It failed. Will it stop us? I don't think so. Remember, we have another hash dump method. Run post windows gather hash dump and hit enter. This method runs in a different way from the previous hash dump method. And here's the hash dump for Windows 8 VM. Again, open a text editor and create a new text file to keep these hashes. So let's just, for fun, have one more hash dump, this time from a Linux system. I send the second interpreter session to the background. Now, I remember that my Metasploitable Linux VM has Java RMI Server Insecure Default Config vulnerability. So that's what I search for, Java RMI keywords. And let's pick this one. Show payloads. To select an appropriate one, I'll set Java Interpreter Reverse TCP. Show options and set the options. Our host is Metasploitable Linux 206. lhost is Kali 222. Leave the ports with the default values and run the exploit. More than one session open. So I use sessions I to interact with one of them, for example, session 3. And I have a session on Metasploitable Linux VM. Meterpreter has no hash dump function for Linux systems by default, so I'll use a post module. Type run post Linux hash dump and hit enter. And once again, we have the dump the password hashes of the victim. So let's create a third hash file for Metasploitable 2 VM. Same method, copy the hashes, open a text editor, paste them, and save the file. So, at the end, we have 3 hash files for 3 of our victims. Now we can turn back to Kane and import the hash file of one of our Windows victims. Okay, so where were we? We run the Kane in the Cracker tab. We click the LM and NTLM hashes on the tree at the left-hand side of the tool. Then we click the plus icon in the toolbar menu, and the Add NT Hashes From window appeared. And now we're in the Importing Hashes phase. The hash files are in my Kali, so I need to copy them into my Windows 8 VM to be able to use them in Kane. You can use WinSCP to transfer files from a Linux system to a Windows system. Now, I don't want to spend too much time with how to download and install WinSCP, so just Google it. It's very simple. My host is Kali 222. WinSCP uses the SSH connection, so SSH service has to be alive in Kali. So let's go to Kali and check the SSH service. First, I want to check if the service is running, and no, it's not. Type service SSH start to start the SSH service. Type netstat TNLP to see the SSH port, and it's 22 by default, but I changed the config before. As you see, my SSH service is running on the port 443. Now, please don't forget to use your own SSH port, and it's probably the port 22. So, back to Windows 8. In WinSCP, set the SSH port, which is 443 for me. WinSCP tool, change the protocol according to the port, but my service is SCP, not WebDAV. So, I choose SCP again. Now, here's an important point. If you try to log in with WinSCP using root user, you may see the access denied message. That just means using SSH service with root user is denied in your Kali machine's SSH service configurations. In Kali, either change the SSH service config to be able to connect with root user or create a new user to use SSH connections. To create a new user in your Kali, you can use the add user or user add commands on the terminal screen, or user's interface of Kali to add a new user. I've already added a user before with the name SSH user for this purpose. You can add a similar user to your system if you want. So now I connect WinSCP using the SSH user credential. Well, I forgot the password of the user. Sorry about that. So I'll go to Kali and type password SSH user to change its password and hit enter. Now, because I'm currently the root user, which is the most powerful user, I'm allowed to change another user's password. So now I enter the new password, retype it, and the password is updated. So now I can turn back to WinSCP and connect to Kali to transfer hash files. Well, I'd like to do one more thing in Kali. So I'll copy the hash files inside the home folder of the SSH user, which is the user I use to connect with the WinSCP. But why am I doing this? Because this user is not a power user, so it cannot access the desktop folder of the root user. Anyway, I copy the hash files into the home folder if SSH user using CP Linux command. So now in WinSCP window, I'll refresh the Kali side. We're in the home folder of SSH user, and here are the hash files. So I'll copy it onto the desktop of Windows 8 VM, and there we go. We're finished with WinSCP, so I'll close it now. Now we're finally ready to import the hash file in Kane. I'll click the button next to the box and select the hash file we copied to the desktop seconds ago. Let's choose XP hashes for this example from the file and creates this table. As you see, there are the users and there are the users' passwords, LM and NTLM hashes. Select one of them. I'll choose administrator. Right-click on the line under dictionary tag, select NTLM hashes. So we are in the dictionary tag windows now. Dictionary list is empty at the moment, so we have to choose at least one dictionary to perform an attack. Right-click on the dictionary table and select Add to List. Now we need a dictionary. Almost every tool has dictionaries by default, so I want to look at the Kane folder to see if there is any. Program files x86 because Kane is a 32-bit application. Kane word list. Here there's a wordlist.txt file. So let's look at its contents. And just a little tip here, I generally use Notepad++ in Windows systems, which is much more powerful than the original Notepad. If you try to open this file with Windows Notepad app, it may take a few minutes to open the file because it's a really big one. So right-click and select Edit with Notepad++. This is the word list. If you look at the bottom of the notepad, you'll see that the file has almost 3.5 million lines. Okay, so I want to look at the word 1234 QQQ uppercase Q, which is the password of the administrator user. The word list does not contain this word. If we start the attack with this dictionary, we're just going to fail. So I want to show you a successful attack, so therefore I'll just add the word here. So let me go down a bit because I want to show the speed of the tries as well. Somewhere here. So I'll add the word, save the file, and close. Now in Kane, I'll add the wordlist.txt file as a dictionary. Now, here there are some options. Most of the password cracking tools, including Kane, have these kinds of options. Password cracking tools do not just use words as they are are also able to use the words in various forms: reverse, double, lowercase, uppercase, adding number behind the words, etc. So we add the dictionary, select the options, and we're ready to launch the attack by clicking the Start button. And now the cracking starts. As you can see in the key rate field, Kane tries more than 2 million passwords a second. Now there are 3.5 million passwords to try, but don't forget the option selected. Every word is tried as is: reverse, double, numbers added, etc. So there are tens of tries for a single line of the word list. And here it is. Kane found the password from the hash in seconds. Well done, Kane. So in the table, the cracked password values are set by Kane. And do you see the LM password? It's all uppercase. So let's try another user. I really don't know the password of this user. So right-click, Dictionary Attack, NTLM hashes, same dictionary, and start. It makes more than 2 million tries per second this time. And the attack's finished. But we failed this time. We couldn't find the password with this small of a dictionary. So in the previous lecture, we couldn't crack the password of a user, CyberLab. So let's try to crack it with the brute force attack. Brute force attack needs a lot of time because it tries all the possibilities. So if you choose the correct character set, the success rate of cracking a password by brute force attack is theoretically 100%. But how long will it take? If the password length is more than 8, it will take months, years, or thousands of years to try all the password possibilities for any ordinary computer. So as you see in the table, the LM password is not empty for CyberLab. A tip here: the hash of an empty password starts with AAD and ends with 4EE. Look at the LM hash of the guest user. Split the hash into 2 identical parts. You'll see 2 hashes that start with AAD and end with 4EE. As I mentioned before, the LM method splits the password into 2 7-character passwords and then takes the hash, which means we have to crack 2 7-character passwords. Well, fair enough. LM method converts the password to all caps, so the character set is not so big. We can crack an LM hash in an acceptable time interval. So right-click on the CyberLab line. In Brute Force Attack, select LM hashes. The Brute Force Attack window is a bit different from the Dictionary Attack window. And as expected, no dictionary list now. Instead, we have a character set combo box. The default character set are just uppercase letters and numbers, no alphanumeric characters in the set. So to keep the demo fast, let's just go with this set. It says 2 hashes loaded. And as you know, the hash value is split into 2 identical parts. On the upper right-hand corner, we can choose the minimum and the maximum length of the passwords. For LM method, max length for the password is 7. So This configuration is perfect. Now I press the Start button to start the attack. Wow! It found the value of one of the hashes in milliseconds. So let's look at the hash file. Yeah, it's the second part. So that means that the password ends with Q. I think the password of the Cyber Lab user is the same with the passwords of the administrator, except the dot at the end. But we'll see. So let's look at the key rate. Kane tries more than 10 million passwords in a second. Now that's pretty fast. In the time left frame, we can see that the trying all possible passwords will take about 2 hours, unless Kane cracks it. So let the Kane run for a while. All right, and we're back. It took more than an hour, and here's the result. We're lucky because no alphanumeric character is in the password, and we succeeded to crack it. The first part is 1234 QQQ. John the Ripper is a fast password cracker currently available for many flavors of Unix, Windows, DOS, and OpenVMS. Initially developed for the Unix operating system, it now runs on 15 different platforms. It's one of the most popular password testing and breaking programs, as it combines a number of password crackers into one package, auto-detects password hash types, and includes a customizable cracker. John the Ripper is free and open-source software distributed primarily in source code form. If you'd rather use a commercial product tailored for your specific operating system, please consider John the Ripper Pro, which is distributed primarily in the form of native packages for the target operating systems, and in general, it's meant to be easier to install and use while delivering optimal performance. Now, there is another version of John, which is the community-enhanced version. This version integrates lots of contributed patches, adding GPU support, OpenCL, and CUDA for 100 of additional hash and cipher types, including popular ones such as NTLM, RAW, MD5, etc., and even things such as encrypted OpenSSH private keys, zip, and RAR archives, PDF files, etc., as well as some optimizations and features. So let's see John the Ripper in action. Official free and open source version of John the Ripper is embedded in Kali. If you type John with no parameter, you'll see the manual page of the tool. You see the usage and all the options of John. Now let's build an offline dictionary attack with John. The first parameter is /word list. Don't forget to put the equal sign after the parameter. Name of the dictionary file with the full path comes here. So I'll open another terminal screen and search for a password list using the find command. Now there is a folder called Word Lists under the Metasploit framework folder. Let's go to that folder to see its content. Now there are a lot of word lists here for different purposes. Right now I want to look at the length of the password list file. Cat password.lst pipe wc for word count. The first one is the number of lines, and the second one is the number of words, which is the same with the line numbers, and the third one is the number of characters. So there are about 90,000 passwords in this list. I'll visit the file with less command. You can search a word inside the less command by pressing the / button. So I'll search for the password of the administrator. No result. MSF admin? No result. So note here that these steps are just to have successful results. In a typical penetration test, you won't know the passwords of the victim systems. Beyond that, if you already know the password of the victim, well, what's the reason of adding it to a dictionary and then finding it again? Suppose that these steps never happened and the words were already in the list we used, right? Now I'll open the dictionary and add a few words. So I'll repeat that we're just supposing that the process never happened and the words were already in the list, but I just wanted to show you the mechanics of it. So now we can use this list as the word list in John. So write the file name with the full path. The second parameter is the hash file. Now I'll run the command adding no more parameters first. So if you don't specify the hash type, John detects itself. It detected the hash type as LM and warns us about the NT hash. And here are the results. Guest password is empty. It also shows the first part of the administrator's hash and the second part of CyberLab's hash. And as you see here, in all uppercase letters. Now I'll recall the latest command and add the format parameter as NT this time and hit enter. Here are the results. Now we see all the letters in their own formats, uppercase or lowercase. So now I want to try to crack the Windows 8 hashes. So I'll give the hash file of the Windows 8 system this time. I remove the format parameter and run the command. John reckons the hashes as LM and got no result. So let's give the hash format. Now we have a result. Password of a Udemy user is Udemy 12. But wait a second. Windows 8 has a user with the password 1234QQQ uppercase Q and dot, which is the same with the password of the administrator user of Windows XP. We know that the word is in the dictionary, so why couldn't John crack it? Well, the answer is inside the john.pot file. So let's find its location using the find Linux command. And let's see the content of the file with the cat command. So John stores the findings in john.pot file with a hash format. And if it finds the same hash with the same format, it doesn't try to crack it again. So you should look at the john.pot file for the hashes you try to crack with John, right? So if we run the latest command again, it won't crack any hash because they've all been cracked before. So if you delete the john.pot file and run the latest command again, you'll see all the cracked results of the hash file. Good, so let's move on and try to crack the hashes of the Metasploitable Linux VM now. The hash file is hash m2.txt, and don't give the format parameter. I'll let John detect the hash type, and hit enter. So it detected the hash type as MD5 crypt, and that's correct. So look at that. We cracked passwords. The passwords of the Metasploitable users are not so complicated, are they? So look at the john.pot file once more. And now you see the new hashes stored with hash type 1, where 1 stands for MD5. Excellent. Patches, authentication mechanisms, password policies, etc., as they're supposed to be. Now, we exploited a database admin's personal computer and found the password of that critical database system just on the desktop. And even worse, you can find such critical data inside the shared folders. So this next section is about to dive into the end-user computers and file sharing. The first way to collect sensitive data is, in fact, not a post-exploitation process. While gathering information in the reconnaissance phase, visit every file server or file sharing places that you have access rights to, just like everyone else. You haven't compromised any system yet, and you haven't escalated your privileges either. Just look at the common places. You won't believe the information you'll gather. Beyond the internal network, you can find very sensitive data through the internet. I'll show you a stunning example. In September 2017, The Guardian reported that Deloitte suffered a cyber attack that breached the confidentiality of its clients and 244,000 staff, allowing the attackers to access usernames, passwords, IP addresses, architectural diagrams for businesses, and health information. Do you know what the main reason of the breach was? An outsourced developer working for Deloitte put the credentials to GitHub. So anyone who visits his GitHub account could see the username password pairs to access the critical systems of Deloitte. When you exploit a system, look inside the system in detail. This is one of the most important processes of the post-exploitation phase. The main focus is on the information present on the target system related to user accounts, either present on the system or that have connected remotely and have left some trace that the personnel performing the assessment can gather and analyze for further penetration or provide the desired goal of the assessment. So I'll show you a few places to look at. On the system, general information that can be gathered on a compromised system are typically history files. History files store recent commands the user has executed. Reading through these can reveal system configuration information, important applications, data locations, and other system-sensitive information. Encryption keys, such as SSH. Interesting documents, so there's .doc, .xls, password, etc. Users often store passwords and other sensitive information in clear text documents. These can be located in a couple of different ways, either by searching through the file names for interesting words such as password.txt, or searching through the documents themselves. Now, there are indexing services that can help with this, for example, the Linux Locate database. User-specific application configuration parameters. Individual application history. MRU windows only, history files, etc. Now, don't overlook web browsers. Information that can be gathered from web browsers that can be used to identify other hosts and systems, as well as provide information to further penetrate a client's network and hosts, are as follows: browser history, bookmarks, download history, credentials, proxies, plugins and extensions, instant messaging clients. Some of the information that can be gathered from IM clients on a compromised system include enumerate account configuration, user, password, server, proxy, chat logs. So I have to warn you, too, that you should take great care that not only data in scope for the engagement is captured, since the information you gathered may contain client's employee confidential and private data. This data should be filtered from the data returned and reported on. Of course, there are some extra methods to collect more sensitive data. However, you do have to think twice about whether these methods are ethical or, even more important, key logging. By monitoring keystrokes, it is possible to detect sensitive information, including passwords and PII. Now, I don't know what the legality of this is if the user is, say, chatting on private IM while also using company software. Does anybody know that? That can be argued in a court of law. If the company says that all the data on the network can be monitored, then it should be okay. Now, if the second bullet point in Protect Yourself is present, and it states that the use of equipment can be monitored and no personal use is permitted, then yes. If policy does not cover the personal user or ownership of data, then no. Seems to me pretty clear-cut. So it should also be extended to cover the network. All right? Screen capture. Now, screen capture can be used to show the evidence of the compromise, as well as access to information that can be shown on the screen and access through other means that's just not typically possible. Great care, again, should be taken with the data collected through screen capture so as to not show the private data of employees or customers of the client. Now let's have a look at network traffic capture. Network traffic capture can be used depending on the controls on the network and medium used for capture, and I'll give you a couple of examples. Identify hosts on the network, intercept data, identify services, identify relations between hosts in the network, the capture of credentials. Now, again, you have to be careful to just capture only the traffic covered under the scope of the engagement, and that the information captured does not fall under the control of local laws, like the capture of voice-over IP calls. Information retained and shown should be filtered so as to protect the client's customer and/or employee personal and confidential data. After all, you're learning how to be a pro here, right? So, previous audit reports. Now, it's a point we never miss. If there are previous penetration tests and/or security audits, you should look at the reports to see the previously detected issues. Every pen test has its own characteristic. Even though the pen tests are performed by the same pen testers, the results may be different each time. So look at the weaknesses and check if they're hardened. Now let's see some data collected through penetration tests. Web.config is the main settings and configuration file for a web application. It's an XML document that resides in the root directory of the site or application and contains data about how the web application will act. Now, you can find some sensitive data inside this file, such as the IP addresses of database servers, username and password pairs, and the database name. As I mentioned before, users often store passwords and other sensitive information in clear text documents. These can be located in two ways, either searching through file names for interesting words, such as serveradmins.txt, or searching through the documents themselves. Another good information resource are email backups. People often back up their emails to the local computer, and these backups are usually accessible without authentication. Configuration files of the client-side applications are another efficient resource for the sensitive data that we're looking for. The tnsnames.ora file is a configuration file that contains net service names mapped to connect descriptors for the local naming method, or net service names mapped to the listener protocol addresses. So you can find the sensitive information about the Oracle database servers inside this file, such as the IP address of the database server, SID, which is a system ID, which is used to uniquely identify a particular database on a system, and the port number. Okay, folks, we are at the end of the exploitation and post-exploitation course, so I want to give you a brief pop quiz. Just kidding, it's a brief summary. So before we got our hands dirty, we prepared the lab for hands-on experiment and demos, right? And again, before starting to exploit the systems, we saw how to find the vulnerabilities to exploit. The first step was learning the concept and the terminologies. And I mean, this could be just my teaching approach, but I want you to learn the subject thoroughly. It's like, learning a recipe, and then you can go to the kitchen to cook, right? So we learned the risks of exploitation and how to mitigate them. We talked about exploit databases and how to find the exploit codes. Then we started to exploit systems using one of the most famous exploitation frameworks, Metasploit. And the last lecture of exploitation was Pass the Hash, a genuine way to exploit systems even though they don't have any vulnerability. And these were the lectures of the post-exploitation section. How to persist in the exploited system, what we can do within the meterpreter session, hash dump, keystroke dump, taking screenshots, and much more. Some more post-exploitation modules of Metasploit framework. How to crack passwords from collected hashes, and how and where to find sensitive data on the network and exploited systems. So I know we covered a lot in a short amount of time, but I really want to thank you for choosing us, and I hope to see you